Imagine being the strongest person in the world and entering a magic academy when suddenly some students start bothering. Imagined it? Well, let's begin. This is Farfados, known as the Titan Slayer and the strongest demon lord to ever walk the earth. After defeating the world's rulers, he felt his life was empty and desired nothing but to feel defeat. But why? Because everyone kept telling him he was a monster and no one wanted to be his friend. So Farfados decided to cast a spell to transfer his consciousness to a second body. After thousands of years, in his new life, he would be able to build friendships. And after 3,000 years, Farfados was reborn into a quiet family. They named him Ard, and his family was very happy. Ard himself was also happy with his new life and decided he would make many friends in this era. When Ard turned 10 years old, his family threw him a birthday party and asked what he planned to do with his future life. Ard smiled and said he would have lots of friends. He went out to the balcony and called out to some children to befriend them, but the children didn't dare approach him and left him alone. Ard was surprised and said to himself, "What did I do wrong? Why do they avoid me? Well, let's try again." He hid in a corner and tried to approach some girls passing by the road, but his heart started beating extremely fast and his stomach twisted from shyness. The girls noticed him in that state and ran away while he laughed sheepishly. Despite that, Ard didn't give up. He called after them and said, "Come on, let's be friends." But his way of speaking was very poor and the girls ran away. Angered more than before, Ard went to the forest and started venting, causing destruction. He burned some ferocious beasts. While walking home, he met the village chief, Haida, who was a friend of his parents. Ard asked him, "Do you know a way to make friends quickly?" The chief looked at him and said, "Yes, I have the solution." Ard felt encouraged and said, "Well, tell me straight away." The chief said, "To win friends, you must treat them with kindness and respect. Otherwise, no one will want to talk to you." Ard understood and was very happy. The chief continued and said, "And my daughter," but Ard interrupted and said, "I'll go try your advice right now." He went and tried the chief's advice, but his method was still strange and not quite right. Every time he approached someone, everyone would avoid him. Angered again, he returned to the forest and burned some more beasts, but his heart was troubled. Suddenly, he heard a girl scream saying, "I hate you." He ran towards the sound and found a young girl fighting a magical beast. He watched her and understood that she was upset, just like him. The girl executed a spell and killed the beast, then looked at Ard and said to him, "What are you doing here?" Ard tried to be gentle, as the chief had said. He meant to say friends. Ard whispered, "Can we be friends?" The girl was hesitant and said, "Friends?" Her voice was full of doubt. Ard said to himself, "This is the first time someone has answered. I must persist until she becomes my friend." He approached and said, "We have many things in common. Come on, let's be close friends." The girl remained silent until she exploded in anger and said to him, "You're disgusting," and walked away, her eyes filled with tears. She returned to her father, who was Chief Haida. Ard returned home and said to the chief, "I followed all your advice, and it's no use." He kept seeing the girl who had rejected him every day and was determined she must become my friend. The girl's name was Arena. Ard tried every day to get closer to her. He sang for her, read her poetry, but none of it brought results. He said to himself, "I won't give up." One day, he heard people screaming in the street, shouting, "Monsters are attacking us." He went out and saw his father fighting the monsters. The chief said to him, "Arena went to the mountain and hasn't returned." Ard got worried and said, "Don't worry, I'll bring her back safe using a flight spell." He flew at high speed to reach her. At that moment, Arena was surrounded by monsters. She was trembling with fear. The monsters mocked her and said, "We'll kill you." Arena threw her sword and said, "Life has bored, do what you want." But deep in her heart, she was very afraid. At the last moment, Ard intervened quickly and protected Arena from any harm. He looked at their leader and said to him, "I hate people like you who bully the weak. If you leave now, you'll walk away unharmed. But if you stay, you'll learn the meaning of real punishment." The monster got very angry and ordered two of his followers to attack. But with just one look from Ard, all the monsters were shattered. The leader began trembling with fear and tried to escape. Ard smiled and said to him, "And where do you think you're going?" And suddenly, he finished him off right then. After that, Ard returned to Arena and asked her, "Are you okay?" Arena replied and said to him, "Why did you come? I want to die. I'm alone, abandoned, and no one cares about me." Ard said to her, "Don't say that. Maybe I don't know what you've been through, but I know the pain of loneliness. Very well then. I truly want to be your friend." Immediately, her eyes calmed down and she said, "So you won't betray me like the others?" Ard said firmly, "Impossible." Arena asked him, "Will you stay my friend until the last day of my life?" Ard answered and said to her, "I will stay by your side forever." Arena was very moved by his words and accepted his friendship. This was the first real victory for Ard since he was reborn. Years passed and they grew up together. Finally, the time came for them to apply to the Magic Academy. They applied together and stood before the principal, who explained that they needed to pass 2 exams, a written exam and a second one to measure magical power. The exams were held and the results were announced. Arena's name was at the top of the list, and when she saw it, she was very happy. But Ard was searching for his name and couldn't find it at all until he discovered it was at the very bottom of the ranks. His score was 0. He was suspicious and said, "But didn't I study well? What happened?" A little later, the principal entered to congratulate them on their success. Not only that, he also praised Ard's answers, saying they were more correct than the official answer itself. In plain Arabic, "My lord, we gave you a 0 only because we didn't know what to write in the face of such genius, kid." After that, he called the rest of the students and said to them, "You are very lucky to study alongside a genius like this." Ard was embarrassed and said, "Calm down, Professor. I'm just a boy from a simple village." He didn't know that. His parents were heroes of old, the ones who killed the huge dragon that threatened the kingdom, meaning his family was very powerful, and he himself just wanted to live an ordinary life. After that, Ard and Arena entered their new class. All the students gathered around them. There were many admirers, and of course, everywhere there are admirers, there are also envious people. And during the lesson, he heard a boy bullying a girl, saying to her, "You're worthless," and he hit her in the face in front of everyone. Ard was about to speak, but Arena stepped forward and said, "Why are you hitting her? That's very bad behavior." The boy laughed and said, "She's a servant in my family. Her magic is so weak that she must have gotten close to someone just to get into this school." Ard got very angry and said, "Apologize to her now." The boy mocked him and said, "I won't apologize. If you want me to apologize, come and defeat me in a duel." Ard was ready to accept, but Arena said to him, "Don't do it. He's one of the strongest mages in the kingdom. He might be stronger than the teachers themselves." Before the confrontation could continue, the teacher entered the classroom. Ard froze when he heard her voice. This voice belonged to Olivia, the former commander, who served with Farfados during the days of the conquests. Ard thought in terror, "She must know me and has come to punish me, to make an example of." But Olivia didn't know who he was, at least not yet. She walked over to him and said, "Causing trouble on the first day?" Ard trembled and said, "Sorry, Professor." Olivia smiled and said, "I like the idea of a duel happening between you and the boy. Well, let's begin, and I will be watching." And the flames began to ignite. The boy provoked Ard and said to him, "Get ready, I'll finish you off right here, right now." He charged at Ard with all his strength, but it was all in vain. Ard didn't move a single step. Not even a hair on his head was affected. The boy was very upset and gathered all his power, filling the arena with blazing fire. Ard smiled and said, "You think this is Gigaflame? This is just ordinary fire. Stop playing games and don't waste my time." Everyone stood amazed at Ard's power and his ability to withstand it so easily. But still, all of that didn't make Ard move a single step. Ard said very calmly, "Come and see what real fire looks like, Gigaflame." And suddenly, he unleashed a spell that shook the entire place to its foundations. Everyone stood amazed by the power of his magic, which was deafening. The boy who was trying to defeat him, when he realized he couldn't do anything, fell to his knees and said to him, "I'm sorry I challenged you from the beginning." Arena and Jeannie were very happy, especially Jeannie, the girl the boy had been bullying before. Afterwards, Ard went to the defeated boy and said to him, "Don't ever challenge someone far above your level again." The boy withdrew in shame, and when he left, Olivia approached Ard and asked him, "You also cast a protective spell at the same moment to protect him from the Gigaflame's fire, didn't you?" Ard nodded and said, "Yes, so he wouldn't get burned." Olivia's eyes narrowed and she said to herself, "He cast 2 spells at the same time?" The whole class was shocked because this dual incantation was a skill lost in this era. Olivia began to suspect him and said, "One day, I will find out everything you're hiding," and walked away. After that, the next day, Olivia gathered the students for training in the dungeon. This dungeon had many floors, and each floor was full of monsters, and each level had its own powerful boss. Olivia told the students, "Form teams of 3 to support each other in combat." Their mission was to retrieve the skin of a magical wolf. When the training began, all the students were running to join Ard's team to feel safe. But Arena chose Jeannie and invited her to join them. At first, Jeannie was shy and hesitant, but in the end, she agreed. When they entered the dungeon, a pack of wolves attacked. Ard and Arena took them out with 1 hit. Jeannie, however, froze in fear and started to cry. Arena tried to encourage her, but Jeannie's self-confidence had been shattered by the bullying that the boy and his family had inflicted on her before. Ard looked at her and said, "Do you want me to teach you magic?" Jeannie lowered her head and said, "I'll be a burden on you." But Ard smiled and said to her, "I still have a long way to go in learning magic myself, but let me guide you to the right path." Jeannie agreed, and Ard began to teach her magic. Little by little, she began to improve, but her magical energy was still very weak. At that time, Ard thought of an idea. He invented a spell to help her. When he cast it, she succeeded in wiping out all the wolves. Jeannie and Arena were amazed. Ard explained to them and said, "This is script magic." Arena said in astonishment, "Script magic? I've never heard of it before." Ard laughed and said, "Of course not. I just invented it." The two of them were left speechless. Arena said, "How can you be so strong? There's no one like you." Ard dismissed her words and said to her, "Forget that now. Memorize the spell I taught you and start training with." When a second pack of wolves attacked, Jeannie this time cast the spell herself and defeated them. She was very happy and ran to Ard, clinging to his arm, smiling from the heart. Arena felt a bit of jealousy and tightly grabbed Ard's other arm. At that moment, they fell into a trap and were thrown into the boss's room. Fear overcame them, but Ard reassured them and said, "Good, this way I can teach you how to use script magic in real battles." The huge dragon attacked Ard, but he stopped the attack with a single flick of his finger. Then he said to them, "The most important thing is to maintain distance from the enemy and also cast the spell with all your strength to defeat the monster." Arena and Jeannie were amazed. With the monster weakened and its final attack about to land, on the verge of defeat, Ard said to Jeannie, "You have to finish it. This is your mission." Jeannie hesitated, but she took courage from his words and unleashed the spell with all her might, hitting the monster from all sides. Finally, the floor's boss was defeated, and Jeannie's fear vanished. Arena hugged her, and the two celebrated their victory. They exited the dungeon and handed over the the monster parts to Olivia, who was very impressed with Ard's abilities. Of course, Ard tried to act innocent, but Olivia's suspicions of him increased even more. Suddenly, the same boy that Ard had humiliated before appeared and mocked Jeannie, saying to her, "You're worthless. You probably cheated, just like you did with me." Jeannie trembled with anger and said, "I can take the insults and the beatings, but I won't let you insult Ard in front of—" She had fallen in love with the boy, mocked her, but Jeannie slapped him across the face. Arena put something on his head and said to him, "Let this remind you not to do that again." Ard smiled to himself and thought, "I believe this is the real beginning." After that, they handed over the rest of the monster corpses to Captain Olivia, whose suspicions about Ard's identity increased more than ever. On the other side, the principal was talking to Ard after Olivia praised his strength and said to him that he was a wonderful and very promising student. The principal asked Ard to participate in a special kingdom festival involving duels in front of everyone, meaning the principal wanted Ard to show off his magical skills to bring fame and wealth to the academy. Ard refused. He didn't want to show his magic in front of Olivia, nor did he like fame. He wanted to live a quiet and normal life like before. The principal pressured him until Ard said, "All right, we'll think about the matter." The principal was happy and said, "I'm waiting for your positive answer." A little later, Ard met Jeannie at the school. She asked him to go out with her on a date. Ard thought and said, "I must refuse before any problems happen." But when he saw her pleading eyes, he couldn't say no. Suddenly, Arena appeared and said that she would join them, and they all agreed to go out together. The atmosphere was calm and beautiful. They saw a play and then went to a restaurant. But on the way, they heard people talking about destroying the kingdom. Ard focused and said to the girls, "Sorry, I have to catch up with them immediately." The two replied and said to him, "We are with you in anything, my lord." They caught up with the criminals and saw them performing a huge spell. Ard said, I understand now." But before he could finish, more criminals appeared and smiled sarcastically and said to him, "You fell into our trap." Ard was not affected and said, "Fine, but it doesn't matter. Your lives are over." One of the criminals, very angry, unleashed a spell that set all of Ard on fire and thought he had defeated, but Ard laughed and easily wiped away the fire. The man was very startled. Then Ard broke the wall the criminals had placed the spell on and hit them all, but a few with the kite remained standing. Ard said, "I spared you so you could explain to me the reason for the attack. If you refuse, I'll finish you off here." The leader came out and said, "You are a monster, but you won't defeat me." He used his last strength and transformed into a demon form, Arena, and Jeannie trembled with fear, but Ard was unaffected. The demon tried to escape and flew into the sky. Ard flew after him, and the girls were amazed. It was the first time they had seen a human fly. Ard hit the demon with fire, but it wasn't enough to destroy him. The demon came out of the crater and took a little girl hostage. The people in the city started screaming in fear. Ard looked at them and said, "There's only one way to ease their fear." He raised his voice so everyone could hear and said, "I am Ard Muir, son of the mage Jack Muir. I will defeat this demon, so don't be afraid." Everyone was shocked by his power. The demon laughed and said to him, "Defeat me? Can't you see I'm holding a hostage?" Ard smiled and said to him, "Well, where is she?" The demon froze because it turned out Ard hadn't launched any fire at all. Instead, he had created a special illusion spell to free any hostage. A genius in the truest sense of the word. When the demon realized he was about to be defeated, he tried to escape, but where could he go? Ard finished him off with a single spell and made him disappear from existence. After that, he landed and reassured the city's people. The girl's mother thanked Ard, tears streaming down her face. But Ard smiled and said, "Don't worry, the matter is simple." Jeannie and Arena ran to his side. The city's people celebrated him, and the scene was very beautiful. The news reached the ruler, and she requested Ard and his companions to reward them. They went to the palace, and there the elegant and wise ruler revealed that she was an old friend of Arena. The ruler offered Ard the title of quintessential mage, one of the highest titles in the kingdom. But Ard had something else on his mind. He refused the title and said, "Can I ask for something else?" The ruler smiled and said to him, "Speak." Ard said, "Instead of naming me quintessential mage, could you increase the budget of my magic academy?" He wanted to avoid the duels at the festival in front of Olivia and also didn't want the fame. The ruler thought and said, "You choose to elevate your school's status instead of seeking your own fame. Such humility must be rewarded." She agreed to his request and added, "And I will still give you the title of quintessential mage, whether out of admiration or for another reason." The ruler was clearly impressed by him. Ard was shocked and said to himself, "Why does everything have to be more complicated?" After that, the ruler gave titles to Jeannie and Arena before dismissing. But in another place, a second gang of thieves was planning, saying, "The son of the mage is stronger than we imagine, but no matter how strong he is, he won't be able to defeat us all." A new plan was made. In the days that followed, Ard's fame in the academy rose great. All the girls started confessing their love to him because of his achievements that amazed the entire kingdom. But this was upsetting Arena more. One day, she pulled him away from another girl and looked at him angrily, then walked off, leaving him bewildered, running after her. At that time, the principal was not happy that Ard had increased the academy's budget and sent him a letter refusing his participation in the festival. But suddenly, a new teacher entered named Jessica and said to the principal, "Don't worry, I will handle everything." That same night, an argument broke out between Jeannie and Arena. The two fought over who loved Ard more. The argument ended with an agreement that they would compete against each other. Ard refused excused and said to them, "Apologize to each other now." The two sat on the ground and agreed, but suddenly Jessica appeared and said, "Why apologize? Compete in the festival and settle the matter there. Let's see who will win." It was part of Jessica's plan, and it was clear that she had no good intentions. The two agreed. The festival began and the duels started. Ard and Olivia were watching from the stands, and the chief and Ard's family were judging the matches. The fights were normal until Irina entered the arena. She unleashed a powerful spell. Suddenly, everyone, and on her way back, she kissed Genie, and they agreed to face each other in the final round. Indeed, both Genie and Irina won all their duels and reached the grand finale. The decisive battle was about to begin, but before they could face each other, one of the villains stood up from the middle of the audience and transformed into a demon form. With him, another group was hidden in the audience, and chaos took over the place. Outside the arena, more demons attacked the kingdom itself. The situation was about to explode. Jessica gathered the students quickly and divided them into teams to fight the demons. Ard and Olivia ran outside to fight in the kingdom, and Jessica stayed with Irina and Genie. The battle began in earnest. Irina and Genie stood back to back, protecting each other and taking down any demon in front of them quick. Suddenly, a blue monster pressured them from behind, much stronger than the rest. The girls tried to launch spells at him, but there was no effect. At that moment, Chief Hido intervened and protected the girls with a powerful wind that completely destroyed the monster. Irina's heart filled with joy when she saw her father, but suddenly Jessica appeared and pushed her hand into his chest. The chief fell to the ground and blood spilled everywhere. Irina ran to her father, unconscious and close to death. Genie screamed and said to her, "Why did you do that?" The girl replied coldly, "I am not Jessica." All of this was Jessica's plan to kidnap Irina. Genie understood the truth and tried to give Irina time to escape, but the girl was very strong. She hit Genie and moved to kill her. And at that moment, Irina screamed in anger and said to her, "If you touch even one of my friends, I will bite my tongue and die here, and all your plans will be wasted." The girl smiled and said, "Well then, that's perfect." With one blow, she tricked Irina, opened her wings, and took her away. The girl's real name was revealed, Ela, leader of the dragons. Irina was taken, and Genie fell to the ground crying. In the hospital, Chief Hido began to regain consciousness little by little under a healing spell from the nurse. Ard was standing by him and asked what had happened. The chief whispered and said, "Irina was taken." Ard's fist clenched, and he said, "Who took her?" The chief replied, "The dragon leader Ela." The principal's face turned pale. "She is a terrifying creature who tried to destroy the world before." Ard said, "No matter how strong she is, I will bring Irina back." Jack looked at Ard with pride and said to him, "I expected that from my son." The chief then took him to the kingdom's armory and said to him, "Choose any weapon or item you like." Ard hesitated a little but agreed. Jack asked the chief, "Aren't you going to tell him the truth about Irina?" The chief replied, "He won't make Irina lose, the only friend she has made in her life." In another place, Irina was dreaming of Ard, remembering the first time they met. In the dream, Ard asked her about her true identity. She revealed it to him, but Ard disappeared. Afterwards, as if he had never known her, she screamed and begged him not to leave her, and suddenly the dream ended. Irina woke up and found herself tied up on all sides. Ela coldly greeted her and said, "Good morning." "Good morning." Irina asked her, "Why did you kidnap? What do you want from me?" Ela smiled and said, "Don't you see the monster behind you? Wait, let me show you." Behind her was a huge monster made from the remnants of demons from the ancient wars. This monster could summon the Lord of Destruction from another dimension, but it needed a sacrificial demonic bloodline. It was revealed that Irina was from a demonic lineage, and her real name was Laful. To avoid hatred and rejection, she lived under the pseudonym Irina. She began to remember her dream, lowered her eyes in sadness, and her heart was aching. Ela began preparing the monster to devour her. Things were about to take a turn for the worse. At that time, Ard was preparing himself for the journey. He armed himself and rode a vehicle resembling an airplane to reach Irina quickly. Suddenly, Genie stopped him, crying, and said to him, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect Irina. I'm worthless." Ard gently patted her head and said, "Don't worry about it. I will bring her back. The most important thing is, don't cry. Come on, prepare dinner for us." Genie's tears turned into a smile, and she agreed. Ard set off at high speed to Irina's location. At that moment, the monster was about to devour Irina, and suddenly, it was completely shattered. Ah, this was Ard arriving. Irina looked at him, her heart filled with joy. Ard landed and said, "None of you will leave here alive today." At that moment, he launched 9 spells at once and destroyed the entire place, everyone inside. Ard ran towards Irina and untied the restraints. She was bound. She hugged him very tightly in a mind-blowing and beautiful scene. But did you think it was over? Just like that? Of course not. Ela began to partially transform into a dragon form and said, "I will finish you here. But before I die, do you know who you're protecting exactly?" Ard replied and said, "Irina is my wonderful friend." She laughed and said to him, "Don't you see that she is of demonic blood and her origin is demonic? Meaning you're protecting a monster." Irina froze in terror, afraid of losing her only friend when he learned the truth. But Ard's words shocked her. He said, "I don't care if her blood is demonic or even if she were the monster itself. All I know is that she is the kindest and bravest person I have ever met in my life. When I see her, I feel like she spreads light and hope. And in the end, you call her a monster? For that, I will never forgive." Irina looked at him with eyes full of love and admiration. Ela became very angry and struck a powerful spell, but Ard blocked it with his spear. She descended upon them, but he suddenly used fire magic and burned her. Ela got excited, and Ard mocked her and and said to her, "You think you're hard to kill?" She smiled and said, "Of course." Ard replied and said to her, "Fine, I'll show you that everything in the world can be destroyed." He threw his spear and pierced her, and it exploded in the middle. Arena thought it was over, but no, that was just the warm-up. Ila transformed completely into a dragon form and said, "Now I will destroy you." She unleashed the dragon's breath, which contained extremely destructive, powerful lightning. Ard created a protective barrier and looked at Arena and said to her, "It's better if you don't see this battle." He unleashed his sealed spiritual energy, and a statue of Lydia appeared around them, covering them in golden protection. Ila was shocked and said, "Who are you?" Ard replied and said to her, "I'm just a simple orb and will defeat you in your own territory." She laughed and said, "You're really crazy to dare face a dragon." Ard focused his eyes and said, "Let's see who's crazy." The two collided with destructive force. Ard launched a powerful spell, but she overcame it and killed him with ferocity and brutality. Ard stood in the air and looked at Arena and heard her scream, "Don't lose," in front of her. At that moment, Ard repeated, "I have no other choice." He summoned his transformation into the form of the demon lord. Ila struck with all her strength, but Ard blocked it with ease. Ila sighed, "How is this possible?" Ard replied and said, "This is analysis, understanding, and control of the battle's flow. That's my way. Now I understand everything about you. The world cast you aside, and that's why you decided to destroy it." Ila screamed and said, "I have never felt this much anger before." The two prepared their final spells, so huge that it seemed the whole world would collapse. They unleashed them at once, but Ard's spell was much stronger and destroyed the dragonly insects. After that, Ard spoke to Lydia and returned her to his spirit. He landed next to Arena, who was shaken after seeing his true power. She tried to smile and said, "Let's go." But inside, she thought and said, "I must become stronger so I can stand by my Ard's side one day." The day ended, and the scene cut to another place. A young girl had been fighting monsters in a dungeon for 3 years. Her name was Solfi. She was a commander under Farfados during his conquests. Solfi said, "Finally, my training is over. It's time to see how the world has changed." She went out and was shocked. How could just 3 years change the world this much? Something must be wrong. Before she finished her words, a masked man appeared behind her and said, "How are you, Commander Solfi?" She froze and said, "Who is this man who knows my name?" Solfi asked him, "Who are you? What do you want?" The man replied and said to her, "Truly, you haven't changed in 3,000 years." Solfi was surprised. 3,000? How? The man explained and said to her, "You don't know. 1 year in the dungeon equals 1,000 years outside." Solf pouted and said, "Yeah, I knew, but it was clear she was lying." She then asked about her sister Lydia, about the demon, Lord Farfados. The man said, "The demon lord died a long time ago. He cast a spell to escape his duties and was reincarnated under the name Ard Muir." Solfi was surprised. How does this man know the truth? Solfi got angry and decided to go punish Ard. At that time, the principal was sitting with Arena, Jeannie, and Ard, telling them about the school's second festival, which required them to perform a play. They agreed and got ready to leave. Before Ard left, the principal gave him a threatening message written on human skin. The message was from the ghoul head, saying he intended to destroy the school and everyone in it. The principal asked Ard to protect them if the threat was carried out. Ard calmly said, "Fine," and they went to class. Suddenly, Solfi entered, asking, "Who is Ard?" She looked at the students one by one and said, "Are you Ard or not?" Until Olivia came forward and hit her on the head, scolding her and saying, "Haven't you learned discipline after 3,000 years in the dungeon?" Ard shook his head slightly in agreement. Solfi noticed him, walked towards him, and said, "You are Ard Muir, the reincarnation of the demon lord, right? You must tell me everything that happened. Where is my sister Lydia? Where are the demons and monsters? And why did you reincarnate?" Ard replied calmly and said to her, "It's all just a misunderstanding." Soul. Olivia insisted and said that she had researched and discovered that he was indeed the reincarnation of the demon lord. Olivia heard clearly, and Ard's situation was about to become very difficult. Ard repeated again and said to her, "It's all a misunderstanding." Solfi smiled sarcastically and said to him, "Fine then, how about we fight? And if I defeat you, you tell me the truth? Or has the demon lord become a coward after all this time?" Ard was annoyed by her insult to his pride. At that moment, Arena entered and said, "If you want to challenge someone, challenge me instead of Ard, but don't you dare speak to him like that." Solfi was affected by Arena, and her resemblance was very clear to Lydia. She asked her, "Who are you?" Arena replied and said, "I am his friend and closest friend." Solfi smiled and said, "Then you must be my friend too." Arena refused. Solfi was upset and said to her, "Fine then." At that time, she faced Ard. Olivia agreed, and they all went to the duel. Ard thought, "I must lose on purpose to reduce suspicions." The battle began, and Solfi took the advantage at first, but her words provoked Ard, and in the end, he turned the battle against her. Olivia announced Ard's victory, and it seemed the duel was over, but Solfi got up again, crying, "I haven't lost yet." She unleashed a new spell and summoned a cursed sword. Ard shouted and said to her, "Don't use that sword here," but she ignored him and attacked with all her strength. strength. Ard activated his barrier and prepared to unleash a very destructive spell. At that moment, Olivia intervened and stopped them, saying, "Look, around you." The sword she's holding emits a deadly poison with every pulse, and it's polluting the air and harming everyone here. Sophie froze in shock and said all of this is because of Ard. Before she could continue, Arena hit her on the head, scolding her and saying, "When you make a mistake, you must apologize to the people around you. Otherwise, you will be worthless, and no one will care about you." Sophie looked around and remembered her sister Lydia's words. Her tears fell, and she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Ard also looked at Arena and noticed how much she resembled Lydia. They returned to class afterwards, and Ard explained to them the details of the upcoming festival and what was expected of. The roles were distributed, and the atmosphere calmed down a bit. But from afar, the masked man was watching Ard silent, planning the plot. He had prepared to kill him. It was clear that trouble was about to start again soon. The next day, the school festival began. Ard and Arena went to the shops together under the pretext of patrolling to protect the school. It was clear that Arena was very happy walking with Ard. Suddenly, an explosion happened in the air. They ran immediately to the place and found Sophie holding her sword, about to attack some. Ard sighed and said, "What brought the devil here?" Sophie replied firmly and said, "Because this man is a devil. Anyone with eyes like that must be a devil." The man, terrified, said, "I'm just an ordinary human." But Sophie interrupted and said, "No, you are a devil." She was very stubborn. Olivia arrived and clarified the situation, saying that this man was a restaurant owner she had worked for before and confirmed he was a normal human. Sophie was embarrassed when she understood her mistake. Arena invited them to the cafe, and she finally agreed. Olivia was standing. Arena and Ard looked at a nearby tree and said he felt a strange energy from it. Olivia replied and said to him, "That's a secret, even from you. I won't tell you, but know that this tree is linked to the sword competition tomorrow. And by the way, I registered my name, Ard." Ard said, "So the winner is predetermined?" Olivia smiled and said, "No, because you are also participating." Ard objected and said, "I don't like to show my strength in front of people." Olivia's eyes narrowed and she said to him, "You will participate, or I'll have to make you participate in another way." Ard surrendered and said to her, "Fine, I'll participate." It was clear she was holding a secret over him. After that, Ard went and saw Sophie at the cafe, but as usual, she was walking towards a catastrophe, ruining everything she tried to do. And yet, Ard had entered the competition when the girls invited. All the girls there were clearly admirers of his. His face turned red from mama embarrassment, but Arena pulled him away immediately. Jeannie confronted Arena and said to her, "You think Ard is yours? Alone? We want to serve him too." Arena replied and said to her, "I won't leave Ard to anyone else, even if it costs me my life." This time, they agreed to resolve the conflict by competing in the sword competition. The winner gets Ard. The competition began. Arena entered first and won easily. Ard and Olivia also advanced quick. Then it was Jeannie's turn. She faced a scary opponent and was on the verge of defeat, but with Ard's words and encouragement, she found her courage and won. They all reached the finals. After the matches, Ard left the arena and met Jeannie. She asked about Arena and Sophie. He told her they had gone to the cafe to help with the crowd. Jeannie smiled and said, "Fine, come with me to the next competition." The competition was a contest to choose the most handsome boy and most beautiful girl in the fest. Jeannie told him she wanted him to be her partner, and her feelings were clear. Despite his hesitation, agreed to please Jeannie and also to watch over the other students. They stood in the place, and Ard looked into the audience, and his eyes fell on a young man with a familiar face. He recognized him and said, "It's the same man who hit Jeannie before." Ard asked him, "Did you come here because of Jeannie?" The man trembled and said to him, "Don't kill me, please." Ard, for a moment, increased his weight tremendously. The man confessed and said to him, "I came just to cheer for the girl on stage." Ard calmly said to him, "What brought you to this state?" The man replied and said, "After you defeated me, I fell into despair, and all I did was eat." Ard shrugged and said to him, "Fine." Jeannie appeared on stage with confidence, and the audience cheered for her. The man looked at her and said to himself, "This girl learned confidence from you. I was an obstacle in her path. I wish I could go apologize, but I can't." And after that, he left, clearly completely frustrated. In the most handsome boy and girl contest, Ard and Jeannie won. They returned to the cafe, and as usual, Arena was upset. After that, the finals began. Olivia faced Ard, and the two met with terrifying strength. Ard created a barrier to block her strike, but in the end, he used magic and was disqualified from the sword competition. Olivia remained in the run. Finally, the decisive battle between Jeannie and Arena began. The attacks were very violent due to jealousy. Every time one of them said she loved Ard, Ard would blush with embarrassment and wish the competition would end. Quick, in the end, Arena won against Jeannie. The girls left the arena, their eyes filled with tears. Arena warned Jeannie that she wouldn't allow her to look at Ard again, but Jeannie didn't take it seriously and forgot the agreement. And at the same time, the masked man was watching them from the shadows, planning to finish them off, waiting for the right moment. The next day, the second part of the festival began. Ard, Arena, and their friends were going to perform a play about the life of the demon lord Farfados before his seclusion. The students were nervous at first, but the performance was excellent, and the audience was captivated. Ard, while acting out scenes that resembled his battles with Lydia, remembered how brutal those battles were. The enemy leader was strong and hard to resist on equal footing, and at one moment, Sophie said she would fight with them, but Lydia refused. A few days later at night, Sophie went to Farfados, her eyes filled with tears. "Why don't you want to let me fight with you. I trained day and night to help my sister. He replied and said to her, fine, do as you please, and I will protect you. The next day, fierce battle began. The leader on the other side was very strong and nearly killed Lydia until the ground under his feet lit up from a trap Sophie had prepared. Lydia seized the opportunity and succeeded in landing a single fatal blow on. Everyone was very happy, and Sophie received the highest honor in the battle. We return to the present time. Their play was very successful. The audience applauded thunderously, but Sophie spotted a girl in the audience who resembled her sister Lydia. She ran to hug her and suddenly discovered it wasn't Lydia. Nostalgia and sorrow overwhelmed her. At that moment, the masked man who had sent the threatening message in the name of Golahid appeared, his eyes focused on the scene, intending to sow destruction. After the performance, Ard and Jeannie waited outside the school to ask Sophie why she had left them suddenly. Sophie arrived, her face full of anger, and said to him, I want you in the arena tomorrow. Jeannie assumed that Sophie intended to confess her love and brought Arena with her to watch. When Ard arrived at the place Sophie had asked to meet him, he found her holding a huge sword, the same sword that belonged to her late sister Lydia. Sophie cast a spell and unleashed the hidden energy in the tree next to them. The sword was linked to this energy. She said to Ard very clearly, I will kill you. She drew a second sword and charged at him with all her strength. Ard flew and assessed the situation, but Sophie was insistent on killing him. When he looked into her eyes, he understood that she had been brainwashed from afar. The masked man was enjoying the destruction. It turned out that when he took Sophie, he showed her a vision of her sister Lydia's death at the hands of Farfados. The shock made Sophie swear revenge. Sophie hit Ard in the back and thought she had killed him, but suddenly she noticed that Lydia hadn't returned. Jeannie and Arena ran to try to stop her, but no one could. Their strikes were like shadows, and when she was about to finish them off, Ard reappeared in all his power. Sophie's anger increased. They charged. Ard evaded the strike without hurting her severely. Sophie found an opportunity to kill, and when she was about to strike the fatal blow, she heard Lydia's voice saying to her, stop! The word entered her mind, and she woke up, regaining her consciousness. The masked man stepped forward, mocking Sophie, and said, you fool! He hit her and took her weapons. Then he went to Ard and said, if she doesn't finish you, I will finish you myself. He attacked Ard with all his strength, but Ard, with just one strike, severed his arm and threw him far away. The masked man got up again and tried to kill Ard with Lydia's second sword. Suddenly, the sword rejected him. The energy returned to his body and electrocuted him severely. Ard grabbed the sword. Its energy was now under his control. He unleashed a huge spell that completely destroyed the masked man. After that, Ard went to grab the second sword, but Lydia's spirit emerged and went to Sophie and said to her, why are you doing this? You fool! Don't blame Ard for anything. Live your life in peace and happiness, and I will always be happy. And her spirit disappeared. Sophie cried between grief and joy. The next day, Ard, Jeannie, and Arena were riding in a carriage. Suddenly, time stopped, and they were transported to another world. A small child stood for them. Ard asked, are you a devil? The boy smiled and said, humans always call anything unknown evil from their perspective. I might be a devil, but if you focus on my true nature, you'll see it's not like that. Ard pressed and said, what do you want from us? The boy explained and said to him, there are infinite worlds. The past and the future repeat themselves. A strange entity is trying to disrupt balance. When it meets the demon lord, it will shake the world, and one of them will disappear. Ard frowned and said, can you simplify your speech? The boy replied and said, I want you to destroy this entity. The three woke up. Ard's expression turned serious. So we were transported to the past? They suddenly heard a girl's scream. They found her running from a huge scorpion. Arena said to him, this isn't like the monsters from our world at all. Ard replied and said, we have to help her. He created many magical potions, and the monster exploded instant. A voice said, you are very strong. Thank you for saving my subordinate. They turned and found Olivia, Arena, and Jeannie. Now, Olivia appeared confused, saying, have we met before? Ard covered the topic and said, no, they just heard about you and were impressed by your reputation. Olivia cast a spell that made the girls lose consciousness, but Ard remained standing. She said to him, why aren't you affected? Ard replied and said to her, you used enough magic. She said to him, come with me. The next day, they woke up in her house, amazed by his strange determination. Olivia said to Ard, it's clear you're new to the area. Ard replied and said to her, yes, I've never been to this region before. Can I ask why you brought us here? Olivia said to him, to join our forces. This is the era of the great heroes, and we are under attack from strangers. Since then, the demons that appeared have started fighting humans. The war we are living in now is caused by the leader, Farfados herself, who is developing human magic, and you have tremendous magical power. After seeing your strength, you will be a great addition. Ard nodded and said to her, meaning, I can't just leave someone like me to walk free? She agreed, but set two conditions and said to him, the two girls, come with me, and the two of you be in the further forces. Olivia's eyes widened. Ard sighed and said to her, meaning, I can't just leave someone free like me to walk? He will agree, but he sets two conditions. The two girls go with him, and they be in the further forces. Olivia's eyes widened. Ard said, of course, I will defend them. Olivia smiled and said, a man like you only asks to work in logistics, distributing weapons, food, and medicine. Ard said to her, we are just magic students. I have no ambitions. Olivia thought for a bit and then said, right, most people in Furta are scientists and researchers, not fighters. Their mission is more in logistics, healing, and and their death rate in the army is the lowest. Fine, if those are your conditions, you will work directly under her command. Serve under my authority, and I'll put you under your own command. A little later, they arrived at the Bird Research Center. Ard thought to himself and said, if we work under her command, the chances of the two girls being in danger will be very low, but this work is a real headache. Suddenly, the lab exploded in front of them. From the smoke emerged Ferda herself. She said, I knew I would succeed. Now the experiment is excellent. And without any effort, she repaired the lab and welcomed them. Inside, she said, new trainees for my department? That's rare. Did you come because you're fans of me? Ard replied and said, so to her, let me explain why we are here. And he told her everything about them coming from the future. Ferda's eyes shone with enthusiasm, and she said to them, I will help you find a way back to your time. But suddenly, Sulfi entered, running after Ferda. After that, Lydia appeared, and Ard was surprised. Lydia grabbed Ferda and said, I told you, the support you're sending isn't enough. Are you making fun of me? Ferda smiled and said, fine then, use these three. But Ard provoked Lydia, and they went outside to fight. Lydia began to launch rocket-like strikes, and Ard blocked everything. She tricked him and threw sand in his eyes, then kicked him and gave him a meaningful look. Ard retaliated, but she countered with a strike that lifted his head into the air. He pushed off from her head and hit her on the ground. Then they hit each other at the same time, creating a destructive collision. With the sunset, the battle ended in a draw. Lydia, panting, looked at Ard and said, you are very strong. Take the two girls and be part of the support. She said to him frankly, I wanted you on the front lines, but it's clear you have your reasons. Ard replied and said to her, as long as you understand that, don't ask for the impossible. Lydia smiled a little and said to him, I still need your strength, Ard. With that talk, he remembered her words that were said to him long ago. He asked her, I heard about your relationship with the Demon Lord. Can you arrange a meeting for us with him? Lydia shook her head and said to him, I don't mind, but even if I recommend you, Farfatos will hate you very much. If you want to meet him, do something to make him trust you. He only opens his heart to those who deserve it. At night, Ard was standing alone, and Latima, Lydia's servant, approached and said to him, you will stay in the palace until the next campaign. Lydia asked me to tell you to use this house as if it were your own, or the house of a close friend. Ard whispered to himself and said, a close friend? I killed someone irreplaceable with my own hands. Do I have the right to call her that? Today, Ard and his companions stood with Ferda's forces away from the front lines. Ferda said, we won't engage in a major clash with the enemy, and even if it happens, these magical tools will protect you. Ard thought to himself and said, according to Ferda and Lydia, we are in the past. At that time, as the Demon Lord, I was expanding my army. The battles against demons and strangers were about to end. He remembered the demons were controlling the area. The united armies of Lydia and Ferda destroyed the forts and strongholds, laying the foundation for our control over the area. But there's no problem from this battle. Suddenly, Lydia's forces attacked the enemy fort, and at the same time, Ferda's camp was struck by lightning magic. It was a trap to destroy the reinforcements and field hospitals, a classic war tactic. Ard thought and said, we thought we were safe, but this is to our advantage. You might not want to meet the Demon Lord, but this is an achievement. At the same time, Lydia's attack on the fort was underway. The enemy leader wasn't visible yet. A soldier ran and said to her, Ferda's forces have been attacked. The attackers are few, but are led by Commander Bolgan. Lydia's eyes widened, and she ran to the place. At that moment, Bolgan headed towards Ard, but fell into a trap and was captured immediately. Lydia and Sulfi arrived just as Ard finished capturing. Lydia said, clearly, the matter is resolved. Ard shrugged. It wasn't a big deal, and said, he didn't deserve killing anyway. Even if the leader is weak, he is still a leader. That's why I let myself capture him. Why did you do that? Suddenly, this weak father is the great military commander we've been struggling to defeat. On any account, you are wonderful. It won't be long before you meet Farfatos. The next day, Lydia took them to the Demon Lord's castle. Arena and Genie were amazed by its grandeur, and Ard felt pride because he was the one who built the castle long ago. When they approached the gates, a great fire shot out at them. Ard created a magical barrier to protect them. A strange person appeared, smiling, and said to him, sorry, consider it a celebratory gift for your achievement. Ard narrowed his eyes and said to him, I've heard a lot about you, Arfato. Lydia sighed and said to him, you never change. If you want to fight, face me. Arfato laughed and said to her, I can't defeat the void. After that, a deafening sound echoed in the hall. Farfatos himself appeared and said to them, why are you causing problems here? I don't remember summoning you. Arfato, leave now. Arfato bowed and said, fine, I'm leaving. Before he left, he said to Ard, follow me. When Farfatos sat on the throne, the servants approached, but he waved them away. Genie whispered and said, the Demon Lord is terrifying. Farfatos turned his head. Demon Lord? Who do you mean? Ard explained quickly. He didn't mean anything, but he thought and said, strange. The title Demon Lord should be famous now. Farfatos studied Ard carefully. Do you know of another person with the title Demon Lord? Ard's heart beat quick and he said, maybe we misunderstood. Ard asked Ferda, could we be wrong? Ferda said, there's a clear difference between the Demon Lord you know and the one known here. Maybe history has changed. It's just a theory, but perhaps someone altered the timeline. This change brought a new Demon Lord. Ard thought about the words of the mysterious ruler and said, there is an entity trying to strike the balance. Maybe we misunderstood. We were asked to face the Demon Lord and kill the strange entity. But what if they are the same person? Genie screamed and said, so the Demon Lord is the one changing history? If we defeat him, we return return to our time? Arena said, why don't we? Ask Farfatos to help us? Ferda shook her head and said, impossible. This demon lord appeared suddenly 3 years ago and invaded lands quickly. There's no information about his goal. We tried to negotiate, but he ignored us. Even Farfatos fought him once and failed. Ard shook his head seriously and said, then Farfatos won't move without a reason. Ferda smiled a little and said, you understand well. Ard clenched his fist and said, if we achieve a greater accomplishment, we can convince him. At that moment, Lydia entered and said, in the next battle, you will join me on the front lines. Ard's eyes, and playing with persistence, he understood and said to her, fine. And as they were walking, Lydia asked and said to him, why the sudden change? You were insisting on logistics before. Ard replied and said, can you tell me this is exactly what we needed? He said to her, it was a wise decision for us to leave the girls behind this time. Why is that? She asked him. Who is our target? Ard said, Mephilos, the Lord of Curses. Sulfi smiled and said, you look scared. Ard whispered and said, I've heard the name before. Sulfi mocked and said, you've only heard? But magic is divided from the beginning into the 7 and the demons. They have a ranking. Mephilos is the highest among them. Ard thought bitterly and said, it's impossible to forget Mephilos. He's the reason I killed Lydia before. They reached the fort. In front of them was an army of skeletal soldiers. Sulfi was about to attack, but Ard unleashed wind magic and wiped them all out. This time, he said to himself, I won't let history repeat itself. Suddenly, fire rose from inside the fort. They ran to find the enemy surrounded by fire. Mephilos' head was rolling on the ground. A man wearing armor and a helmet appeared. He said to Ard seriously, you are late. The man laughed a dark laugh and said to him, you know who I am? I am the Demon Lord, a violent monster, a tyrant, an enemy of the whole world. Deliver a message to your leader. The lands I want will be mine. If he wants them back, let him come and take them by force. And after that, he disappeared before their eyes. The next day, a meeting was held about the Demon Lord. One of Farfatos' aides said, wait, people like us are not fit to attend this meeting. Another replied and said, these fighters have earned the respect of Lady Ferda and Lydia. We must allow them to participate. Farfatos said, these 7 are Lydia's guests. We cannot ignore their contribution to the war. And then he looked at Ard and said, I've changed my mind about the Demon Lord. Since he has declared war, we must defeat him. We will face him with all our might. Our armies will finish him in one day. One of the advisors asked and said, so we will deploy the 4 judges to the battlefield? Farfatos replied and said to him, and I will also enter the field myself. Another objected and said to him, if you do that, our areas will be left undefended and the enemy will attack us all at once. Farfatos said, your fear is logical. That's why we must finish everything in one day. Ard asked and said to him, but the Demon Lord said he is immortal. How will we be able to defeat him? Farfatos replied and said to him, that's a secret. And after that, he announced and said, the battle will begin in 3 days. Your mission is to destroy the enemy's fortress. After that, Ard went to his room thinking and said, history has changed. They were supposed to die and are still alive, and nothing happened to Lydia. The ruler wants us to correct history. If we return with things like this, and at that moment, the Demon Lord appeared and said, it will happen exactly as you fear. Ard asked, what do you need from me, O Demon Lord? He replied and said, the history they determined is hard to change easily. At this stage, a huge force will move, and you will have to face your fate in the end. Ard pressed and said to him, you are also from another era. The Demon Lord said to him, enough of this pathetic acting. I know you are, Ard Muir. There's no need for the act in front of the mirror. I am you, and you are me. And he removed his helmet. Ard was shocked when he saw his face. It was exactly his own. The Demon Lord said, there's no reason to be surprised. I came to this era. Isn't it strange that this happens? We are the same person, born in different worlds. We both lived as Farfatos and crossed into another world as Ard Muir. I gained a lot before I lost everything. Quickly, you haven't lost anything yet. Ard asked him, how did you come to this era? He replied and said to him, the same way you came. As soon as I accepted the ruler's offer, I found myself here. Strangely, to achieve my goal, I had to wear the name I hated before. Ard asked him, and what is your goal? He replied and said to him, to save Lydia. I want to correct my mistakes, and the same applies to you, doesn't it? Come with me. We don't have to fight each other. Ard said to him, 2 questions. First, have I spoken to myself in this era? The Demon Lord replied and said to him, no, I hate myself more than anything, especially myself in this era. His stupidity cost me Lydia and made me kill her with my own hands. Ard asked, then why are you fighting myself in this era? If your goal is to save Lydia, facing yourself is stupid. The Demon Lord said, certain circumstances prevent me from cooperating with him. Unfortunately, I have to kill him. Just as the ruler gave you a mission, I also have a mission to destroy this world. Ard was shocked and said to him, destroy the world? What does that have to do with saving Lydia? The Demon Lord said to him, do you remember how Lydia died? Of course, I can't forget that. It's impossible for you not to understand my feeling. A curse entered her mind. She lost allies and many things until the day everything was decided. Ard said calm. To defeat the last crow, I had to take a tremendous risk. It was hard for me. I was thinking of ignoring the final enemy, but when I weighed Lydia's life against the extermination of all the strangers, I chose Lydia's energy. The Demon Lord grabbed him and said to him, why didn't you tell her that? If you had told her all of this, my mistake wouldn't have happened. My mistake was letting Lydia enter the enemy's land alone. I lost her in the battle and saw her become a threat to the whole world. I couldn't bear the guilt, and after that, the world gave me no rest. When I crossed to another world as Ard Muir, everything was taken from me. My goals, my dreams, every thought Finally, the demon lord said to him, "At this stage, I know I'm piling sins upon sins. I want to end all this and correct all my mistakes, save Lydia and become the enemy that the whole world hates. And then I'll let her kill me, and after I make Lydia walk the same path I was forced to walk, everything will be over for me, and you must be prepared to commit this sin with me." Ard heard Lydia's voice, saying to him, "Don't do it, you idiot." Ard stood. The demon lord said, "I'll give you time to think. I'll wait for your answer in 3 days." And after that, Ard walked with Latima on the road. He asked her, "Have you served Lydia for a long time?" She replied and said to him, "Yes. If you had to choose between your life and Lydia's life, what would you choose?" She said to him, "That's a stupid question. I would do anything for Lydia." After that, he went with her to the village. She tried to make him enjoy himself, but in the end, she was the one who enjoyed it. They fought and exchanged blows until they got tired. After that, she asked him, "Did you calm your mind?" Ard smiled lightly and said to her, "You're good, even if you're a little stupid." After that, he asked her, "If you had a chance to sacrifice everything to get back something you lost, what would you do?" She said to him, "Come, let me show you some," and took him to an abandoned place. She said to him, "This is the sin I committed. The ghosts of the people who were killed appeared. I know I have to face them, but I always run away. This village had demons, but we attacked it long ago. It was a strategy in the war. We had to control it at any cost. Destroying the fort and defenses was easy, but control was hard. The villagers refused to listen and attacked us at night, so we decided to kill them all. If we hadn't done that, we would have lost our comrades. They might be called monsters, but in truth, they were just like us." Lydia said, "I will fight and build my path with the sword until I create a world where there is no threat to humans or sadness, even for demons. Perhaps then my death will be miserable and sad. I am not a person worth you changing your principles or sacrificing yourself to save." And she asked him about his needs. Ard said to her, "And our feelings." Lydia said to him, "I must atone for what I did. If I don't do that, I will never die with my head held high. Please, don't. Try to change the way I die." The next day, the battles against demons, enemies, and dragons returned. Farfatos drew many magical circles and opened black holes with them that swallowed the dragons on the ground. Sulfi and Lydia kept fighting with swords. Sulfi said, "It would have been easier if Ard were here." Lydia replied to her and said, "He went somewhere. He must have something important." At that time, Ard and the demon lord were standing on the destroyed land. The demon lord asked him, "What is your answer? Will you save Lydia with me?" Ard replied and said to him, "We will not save Lydia." The demon lord asked, "How did you reach this decision?" Ard said to him, "Because she doesn't want that. She wants to bear the title of hero and die to atone for her sins." Those were her words to me. He ignited the fire under Ard. He jumped and got out of the place immediately. The magical circles closed on him, but Ard laughed scornfully. A pathetic technique. He removed them all quickly and landed on the ground. Then he launched a crushing spell on the demon lord, and the man was as if it had no effect on him. He understood the spell's range and the formulation of the counterspells. It was his own work. Ard asked, "It seems we won't reach an agreement?" The demon lord replied and said to him, "I know you didn't have to make me your enemy. Why did you set the answer deadline as the same day the war began?" He left the question hanging in the air, and at the same time, Olivia gathered Jeannie and Irina and said to them, "Our mission is part of Ard's plan. Ard discovered the secret behind the demon lord's strength, and that's why he ordered to accompany you to the fort where he is holding it." Irina asked, nervous, "Why did he tell you and not us?" Olivia replied firmly and said, "Because the matter must remain secret. The matter is very important." Irina said, her eyes shaking with anxiety, "Can you tell me the plan?" Olivia shook her head in agreement. "And, most likely, the demon lord is hiding his vessel inside the fort." Ard passed by quickly and said we would use it. Irina asked, trembling, "Why us? Why did Ard talk to you and not to us?" Jeannie smiled and encouraged her, saying, "It's not against you, Irina. You are the one who shines in these moments when things reach their peak. You are the first one to open your eyes." Irina's eyes sparkled again and she said to her, "You're right. Let's go." Suddenly she rushed forward and pushed them aside when her foot tripped, and she said, "I will stop the enemies. You two run quickly." And at the same moment, Ferda tore through the demons with her mechanical soldiers and her cannons that fire beams, and the others scattered powerful magic on the battle. Finally, Jeannie and Irina reached the vessel, but as they approached, a trap was triggered and bound them with chains. Latima appeared, her voice cold. "This spell locks your magical powers." In another place, the demon lord showed Ard a vision of Jeannie and Irina in prison. "If you value their lives, join me," he said, and Ard asked calmly, "And if I refuse?" The demon lord replied and said, "Nothing will happen to them. This is just an act." Ard's eyes narrowed with annoyance and said, "So you want to give me an excuse to tell people that you forced me to join to save them?" The demon lord's voice trembled and said, "I know Lydia would rather die satisfied than live in despair, but we are the ones who killed her with our own hands and encouraged her to walk the path that led her to this end. We will carry this sin for the rest of our lives. Even if Lydia herself desired a tragic end, isn't it natural for us to wish for her happiness instead of bearing our guilt? I will tear apart the souls of thousands of people if that's necessary for Lydia to live. I will push the world until it collapses. If that's the price for saving her, people's lives have no value to me." The demon lord continued and said to him, "There is a part of you that feels the same way. Why don't you answer?" And he asked him, "If you're not convinced, I'll give you another excuse. Perhaps I won't harm the girls, but can you guarantee what will happen when Farfatos' army reaches this fort?" Ard's voice was cold and said to him, "You placed your vessel here as part of your calculations." The demon lord smiled sarcastically and said to him, "Let me simplify it for you. If you don't want to lose them, you must join me." Arena turned to Latima and said to her, "Why are you doing this?" Latima replied and said to her, "For one reason only, Lydia, and you don't need to understand more. You are just tools to be manipulated." Jeannie's eyes lit up and she said, "I can break free." She mocked and said to her, "What will you do without magic?" Jeannie smiled lightly and said, "We can still use script magic together." She and Arena chanted script spells and broke their restraints. Latima smirked and let the door open, summoning a horde of monsters. At that moment, Lydia appeared and cut them all down. Arena was shocked. "How did you know we were here?" Lydia replied and said, "The pins I gave you are magical devices. I can track your condition with them." Then she addressed Latima. "Surrender," Latima screamed and said, "You will never surrender. We will destroy the world if that's necessary to save her." Lydia calmly slaughtered all the monsters and hit Latima until she lost consciousness. More monsters attacked, and still Lydia fought fiercely, feeling the life force of the demon lord approaching. At the same time, Ard faced the demon lord and said, "You don't really want to save Lydia. You are trying to cover up your guilt for killing her so you can forgive yourself and die in peace. You are exploiting Lydia. For that, you are a coward. The whole time, we have been acting on selfish motives without thinking of others. Let's act once for someone else. Let's fulfill Lydia's wish." The demon lord appeared and said, he gathered his strength and said to him, "Yes, you are right. I want to forgive myself to save her, but I won't allow you to deny my feelings for Lydia." After that, each of them summoned Lydia's spirit, and each of them transformed into the form of the demon lord. The demon lord shouted and said to him, "Why did you cross to another world? Wasn't the reason that you couldn't bear the loneliness, and then you come to blame me for being a coward? Do you remember our last words to Lydia?" Ard replied in a broken voice and said to him, "Never." His mind raced quickly, and he couldn't find the words to say. Lydia once asked him, "What are you thinking about?" He said to her, "What do you mean?" She asked him again, "Why did you agree to the ceasefire offer?" "We will stop the war and make a truce with our enemies. We won't kill a demon nation, but we will bear the consequences." She said to him, "We can strike them now while we still have a chance." She said to him, "I am determined. No words will change my mind. I thought we had the same ambition." She turned away and said to him, "You are a traitor. If you intend to fight them, do it alone. I don't care anymore." The demon lord shouted and said, "I had to say that word. I didn't mean it. I should have told her the truth that I don't want her to die. I won't allow Lydia to face such a cold end. I must save her." He struck Ard with all his strength, but suddenly Lydia herself appeared and grabbed his hand. Ard said calmly, "If this is your wish, I will do it." After that, he charged at the demon lord and struck him a fatal blow and said, "This ends here. The lost catastrophe. I am the second one. I am the demon lord." He breathed with difficulty and said, "Do you really think this will fix things? Do you remember the days we spent with Lydia and what they meant to you?" Ard said to himself, "Please, I can't fail after I lost her, but I understood I must save her." But Ard plunged the sword into his heart and the light covered him completely. And at the same moment, Arena and Jeannie began to glow. Lydia appeared before them, smiling calmly, and said, "It seems you have returned home." Jeannie asked, "Did you know this would happen?" Lydia answered her and said, "Can I ask you something? What is the future like? Is it a world where everyone can live in it and smile?" Sadness overwhelmed them both. Jeannie replied gently and said, "Yes." Lydia added and said, "The world is beautiful as I dream. I enjoy every day, even if we fight sometimes. But we are happy. I believe it is truly a world where everyone smiles." Lydia whispered and said, "I understand. Then our sacrifices were not in vain." They reached Ard's words. After that, they returned to their world. Farfatos ended the war. Ard was transported once again to the ruler's world. The ruler said to him, "I am impressed that you completed your mission." Ard asked him, "Who are you really, and what is your goal?" The ruler replied and said to him, "I can't tell you, but believe me, I am at least your ally." Ard said to him coldly, "I hope we don't meet again." "And I also." The ruler answered him and said, "And I too." Ard woke up with Arena and Jeannie. Sophie welcomed them and said to them, "We have arrived." Olivia called and said to them, "Hurry up, there are requests already." Sophie looked around with nostalgia and said, "So much has changed. We haven't reached the old capital city." Arena leaned on Ard and said to him, "Lydia left a message." She said to him, "No matter what happens, we will always be the dearest of friends." Tears welled in Ard's eyes. He felt Lydia's presence behind him, pushing him forward, motivating him to move on. And thus ends the tale of our hero, Ard, today. Before we end our story, don't forget to like, share, and comment on the video, because that's what encourages us to continue. And if you are new to our channel, subscribe and hit the bell icon to get all the new updates. Okay, goodbye.